So, what if one of America's founders predicted that the nation's greatest threat wasn't some foreign army, but itself? That the states, if they were just left to their own devices, would become their own worst enemies? Well, that's the really stark warning from John Jay in Federalist number 5, and we are about to unpack it.
This right here, this was his fear, laid out in just 4 pretty chilling words: that a divided America would just squander its strength, turning all its power inward until it was a threat to absolutely no one but itself.
So, who was the man who saw this danger so clearly? I mean, what drove him to put out such an urgent warning about the dangers of disunity? Well, that's exactly what we're here to find out.
To really understand the warning, you have to understand the man. And look, this wasn't some academic theory for him. This was a real-world, 5-alarm fire kind of warning from one of the most experienced statesmen of the entire era, John Jay.
I mean, just look at this guy's resume. It really speaks for itself. Jay had a front-row seat to the absolute chaos of the Revolution and everything that came after. He was in the room for the Continental Congress, he was out there negotiating with foreign powers, and as Secretary of Foreign Affairs, he saw firsthand just how weak the young nation really was on the world stage.
And here's the core of the problem he was seeing. America's first government, under the Articles of Confederation, was basically a league of friendship. That's what they called it. The central government, yeah, it could declare war, but it couldn't actually raise the money or the troops to go fight it. It was a government with all of the responsibility and pretty much none of the power. And Jay knew. He just knew. It couldn't last.
Okay, so let's dive into the core logic of Jay's argument in Federalist number 5. Because he didn't just say, hey, division is bad. No. He laid out a very precise and honestly terrifying chain reaction.
He predicted that if the Constitution failed, America would splinter into maybe 3 or 4 separate confederacies. And right away, these new little mini-nations would start competing. Jealousy would start to fester over things like trade and territory, and as one of them, inevitably grew stronger than the others, fear and distrust would follow. And you can bet, foreign powers would be just waiting to play them off one another, until finally, the American states would be at war with each other.
And this wasn't just him making stuff up. Jay pointed to the one history his readers knew best, Great Britain's. He argued that for centuries, England, Scotland, and Wales were separate, warring nations all on a single island. Their division made them vulnerable and kept them in this state of constant conflict. America, he warned, was heading right down that same road.
The language Jay uses is just so direct. He's literally painting a picture of a future where the states aren't just competitors, but active enemies, completely consumed by discord, jealousy, and mutual injuries. This was the nightmare scenario that the Constitution was designed to prevent.
So, Jay and the Federalists, they won the argument, and the Constitution was ratified. But how did his philosophy of a strong, unified nation actually play out when he got the chance to put it into practice as the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court? Let's take a look.
One of his key successes came in 1794. At the time, French privateers were capturing ships and bringing them into American ports, where French officials would just decide what happened to them. Well, in the Glass v. Betsy case, Jay's court put a full stop to that. They ruled that American courts had the final say in American territory. This was a huge step in establishing national sovereignty.
But then came the Jay Treaty. Jay was sent to Britain to try and avoid another war, and he negotiated a treaty that achieved his main goal, which was peace, but he gave up a lot in return. It did very little to stop the British from seizing American sailors on the high seas, and, well, it absolutely infuriated a lot of Americans. The public reaction was brutal. I mean, truly brutal. Jay basically went from a founding father to a public enemy overnight. He famously joked that he could travel all the way from Boston to Philadelphia just by the light of his own burning effigies. His effort to secure the nation through diplomacy actually made him one of the most hated men in America.
So, what's the final verdict on a guy who preached unity but ended up at the center of so much division? What really is John Jay's ultimate legacy?
It's deeply complicated, there's no other way to put it. He was a brilliant legal mind, a fierce advocate for a strong union, but his signature treaty was incredibly divisive. And the biggest contradiction of all has to do with slavery. He founded the New York Manumission Society and, as governor, signed a law for gradual emancipation. And yet, he continued to enslave people personally throughout his life. His principles and his practices were often in this really profound conflict.
And that kind of leaves us here. John Jay's deepest fear was that America's internal divisions would make it its own greatest enemy. He saw how easily jealousy and distrust could just curdle into conflict. The question his legacy leaves for us is a simple one, but it's a powerful one. Was he right to be so afraid, and what does his warning mean for us today?